Lemon Amiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hey there, welcome to another Lemon Amiga game guide and review. In this week's show, we'll be taking a look at Golden Axe, developed by Probe Software and released by Virgin Games in 1990. The introduction sequence is almost identical to the arcade, and some graphics have been provided of the main characters, Death Adder, and the three companions in this game. By pressing the fire button, we can choose which character that we wish to play, and because this is the two-player mode, we will choose the Barbarian and the Dwarf. Beginning of the game, you'll be introduced to Alex, who will die immediately, so if you press that fire button, he will die and get on with that, and then you can get on with killing a few more people. And in this game, we play as a number of warriors. We'll be trying this in two-player mode, because that really is more impressive than one-player action, and I'm playing this with a good friend who actually introduced me to the Amiga way back when, and he's one of my oldest friends, and probably my best friend, and so he is playing as the warrior at the moment, and I'm playing as the dwarf. And we tried to get as far as we could on this play, and as you can see, we got far. And the art of this game is to simply beat up as many of the opponents as possible using whatever tricks are available. And sometimes we can find dragons, which will help us take care of those guys. And it's very impressive when that fire emits and those guys fry, but of course those characters don't catch fire and they don't turn into a cinder either. This is certainly an arcade game, and there is no blood either, so in this realm it's very difficult to stay on target, and so sometimes it's best to use magic. By pressing the Alt keys, we can choose to activate the magic of our two players in this case. And if you have two players playing this game, of course it should make it twice as easy, with twice as much magic and twice as much energy to burn. This is the first time that either of us have played this game in perhaps 20 years, and we could complete this game together at one time, but unfortunately in this period we did not complete the game. We managed to get all the way to the penultimate stage you can see here, which features an eagle, and it's sometimes pretty difficult to stay on that bridge, because if you move one pixel off it, then you'll fall off and waste a life just like that. The dwarf during these playthroughs, and unfortunately I've died, so that means my friend has to continue as far as he can without me. And that's absolutely as far as he got, and that was so embarrassing that I made sure that that was in this video. But that's how far we got on our very first try, and that's almost at the end of the game, but not quite. So several weeks later, almost a month later, we got back together and we decided to tackle this game all over again. again, I'm the dwarf, and no, that looks like the golden axe, but according to the story, Death Adder has stolen the golden axe, as well as somebody's girlfriend and somebody's princess that you have to rescue, and it's the usual rescue maidens from the tower scenario. And you might be surprised to learn that the program of this game actually worked on Gauntlet 2 before this, and so Heroes games weren't uncommon in this period. Certainly this is a step up from Gauntlet 2 and the overhead views that we got in the arcades. Now we can find action adventures with nicely filled in graphics, and it has to be said, pretty difficult jumps. So you will find that this is our second playthrough through the game, and Simon is already on that dragon, casting mayhem through that level, but unfortunately that dragon only has a limited period of action, and if you fall off that thing, he'll run away, and that means I've had to use my magic and get rid of that the easy way. The dwarf's magic is comprised of lightning, and the barbarian's magic is comprised of earth spells, so you'll find earth tremors and boulder fields at the barbarian's magic hands. But it's great that we have magic, because it means that if we are struggling on a level, we can simply press one of the Alt keys and we can use that up. And you can see it's much easier with two players in action, because even though those guys can really gang up and reduce our energy, at least if two players are in fighting mode, we can get through those twice as quick. You can always press the Alt key by mistake when one guy is just about to die, and you can see I wasted a full amount of magic, and we'll go into the magic a little later, but the full amount will destroy everything on that screen, a full bar, and that was a wasted opportunity. So this is our second play through this game, and we've got to exactly the same point as we got before, and as you can see we are getting our asses kicked. An action replay of the time before. Let's see if Simon can get a foot further at this time. No, he makes exactly the same mistake again, and that throws away the level again. And so at the end of the game you'll be provided with a rough score of how far you got with a percentage, and 39% according to that. That's unfair because we were almost right at the end of the game, so I'm not quite sure how those percentages are worked out. But yes, more weeks went by, maybe another month, and we got back together again. This time, third time lucky. Let's choose our characters, and this time let's choose a different character. Simon this time is going for the warrior maiden, known as an Amazon, and she should be able to jump and run much more quickly than the barbarian, so let's try that. Golden Axe was developed by Sega, and it was developed in the arcades originally by Team Shinobi and released in 1989. This 1990 Amiga conversion was originally developed on the Atari ST and then ported lock, stock and barrel over to the Amiga. And so that's why the 16-bit versions look identical, but in this version we have some music and some better sound effects than the Atari ST, and so let's persevere this and let's see how far we can get. When an enemy dies, get an obligatory sample, and if a female dies she will go ah. So and ah are the stock sound effects in this game, but periodically we will also find another dwarf or another small creature, and kicking that will reveal one item of magic. And so we've collected a number of items of magic which are appearing in the top bars. You can see on the left hand side that's the dwarf's magic, and he only acquires 4 magic potions to get a full bar, and on the right we have the Amazon's magic, and she requires quite some more. But you can see we can only be powered up to level 3, whereas the Amazon can go all the way up to level 6. Usually at power 4 we'll get rid of everything on the screen, and so if we find one more magic bottle, then we can get up to that power. You can see the magic elements will appear every so often, and that will top us up, but we do not find any extra energy at this point. That comes later on in the game. You can see the energy bars are on the bottom of the screen. To the left again is the dwarf, and we haven't lost 1 bar of energy, and on the right is the Amazon. We start off with 3 lives and 3 energy bars, and it takes at least 4 hits to knock off 1 of those energy bars, so you can survive a beating in this game and you can continue for quite some time. There are also 3 types of creatures that we can climb aboard. This first type of dragon is harmless and doesn't actually launch any fire, and that can be used against the enemies by pressing that fire button. He will wipe his tail all over that screen and take any enemies out along with it. And so those are easy to get onto. Simply walking into those icons will make us ride that dragon, and as long as we stay mounted, then we'll ride those to the end of this level. Like all the greatest arcade games, at the end of each level you will find a boss, or in this case 2 bosses, and if we are on the dragons it means we can use that tail, and those lumbering bosses really don't take much to knock out at this point, and we don't really need to use that magic, but because we get that magic again at the start and at the end of every level, it's probably best to use that up, and then we don't waste any energy. Hobbit will only hang around for a limited time, and if you can trap that in the corner, that can really give out the magic. And just like the arcade, we get a very identical map, and we also get a storyline as well. Jumping off those cliffs, this landscape is meant to roll synchronously from one part to the next, and apart from the loading, the arcade version seamlessly moves from one location to another, but on the Amiga we will have to imagine now that we've just fallen onto the back of a giant turtle. If an enemy appears once at a time, then it's probably best to tackle that enemy once at a time, and that's why the second player is hanging back, because sometimes if the second player gets involved, well, sometimes they can miss completely. But the best thing to do is to use your forces together and to tackle all these enemies, and hopefully after they've been hit at least 4 times, they will die. Just like Bionic Commando on the Amiga, we'll have to force the screen to scroll by walking to the edge, and if anything appears on the edge, that's pretty unnerving, because sometimes you can walk straight into danger. Sometimes those enemies can run in from the side, so the best thing to do is to simply use the diagonal, and in this game the cheat is to move into the diagonal because they cannot hit you. And so all we have to do is to keep moving. Oh, look at that, the villagers making us rather nervous, and that's because we're about to face our first fire-breathing dragon. In Golden Axe, it is possible to hit each other, either using our fists or using our weapons, and certainly using this fire. That's why I'm getting out of the way, because if that fire hits me, I'll simply lose energy, just like that, and my friend's simply wasting me away while he's trying to get all those enemies. So again, moving on the diagonal means I'm pretty safe from every attack, including that fire, so if in doubt, move diagonally. That's the dwarf's magic full to the top, and so the Amazon can wade in, again trapping that thing against the side, and now we're almost on full energy. It means that we can tackle those bosses, and the screen really does fill up with enemies at this point, which makes it even more exciting. On the Commodore 64, only one enemy would appear in one time, but on the Amiga we get maybe 5 on the screen, and so we are just about to use that magic, so that makes the job a lot easier. And on this stage there is no end of level boss, you'll simply get 4 characters attacking all at once, so all the best use of that magic is required. Amazon's magic is limited to fire, and it might surprise you to learn that each one of these characters actually has a name. The barbarian is known as Axe Battler, the dwarf is Gilius Thunderhead, and the Amazon woman is known as Tyrus Flare. At the end of this stage we also get a green hobbit, and kicking that will reveal a chicken leg, and unfortunately I didn't get any chicken legs, which means I still have the 1 energy. We have now reached the midpoint of this game, and it only came on 1 disc and it only takes 20 minutes to complete this, but that's more of the fault of the original arcade version, which was rather short. And so as you can see we are still on those 3 lives, but unfortunately 1 more hit means it's a life over for me, and that's very difficult to come back from that because you cannot gain any extra lives in this game. You can gain some extra energy which will restore a life, but once those lives are gone, then that's it. By pushing up and pressing fire we can also jump, and by pulling back and pressing fire we can do a roundhouse attack, and because we have to literally budge that screen along, it's pretty difficult to make this pretty easy jump, and you have to be really careful, otherwise you'll lose a life. And I'm being extra careful here in case I get fried by that guy on the dragon, because he's pretty lethal and I don't get anywhere near that thing, otherwise I'll be lacking of energy. Look at that, he hit me again, so there's no way out. All he can do is back off and let me tackle those women, and when those women simply attack and wipe me out, then he can take care of those all over again. Golden Axe was coded by Richard, otherwise known as Riccardo Costello, and he started out on the Commodore 16+4, converting Way of the Exploding Fist for Melbourne House in 1985. He also released Gauntlet 2 on the Amiga, which he converted in 1989. Before this, in 1990, and Hot Rod also appeared in 1990. He then used the Golden Axe engine again in the game Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which he coded for Ocean, and after that he used the same Golden Axe engine in Motorhead, which he signed a deal with Lemmy and used Lemmy in Motorhead in 1992. And finally, Richard Costello created the Mortal Kombat games on the Amiga in 1994. Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 is a pretty good action romp, and he used the Mortal Kombat engine in Primal Rage, which appeared in 1995, which was yet another arcade conversion. And it was criticised because the characters didn't have a 16 or a 32 colour character colour reference, but on the arcade that has custom arcade graphics, and of course the Amiga can't cope with everything. What we do have on the Amiga is some great graphics, and those were created by Kevin Bulmer, who went on to Legends of Valor after this, and also worked on Gravity Force 2 and Gauntlet 2. And the additional graphics were created by Mark Knowles, who started out with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the Amiga in 1989, which is a very similar game, and went on to Lemmings, and then Hot Wheels appeared in 2003, moving on to MotoGP in 2006. Finally, additional graphics were created by Adrian Carless, who coded Ramparts in 1987 on the Amiga, and we last heard of him in the Zool review. He created the maps for Zool and the character design for Zool 2. Lastly, the music was created by David Whittaker, and David, he actually coded Lazy Jones in 1984 and moved on to a rake of games and a rake of music on both the 64 and the Amiga, and finally he is actually today heading up the Lego games. He is actually head of audio for all the Lego games, including Lego Hobbit and the new Lego Marvel Heroes games. And so if you have played a Lego game, you will have heard David Whittaker's music. The original arcade machine featured sampled sound effects from First Blood and Conan the Barbarian, but I really don't think any of those samples have been used in the Amiga conversion, and that's a slight shame that we get some stock, but it's great that we do have some speech in this game, and speech in even 1990 was pretty rare. Even Robocop, we were treated to a number of phrases, but that was about it. At this stage, I'm hanging around on this pier because the enemies have to jump up to that, and when they jump up they are vulnerable to my attacks. And so if the Amazon throws those guys onto the pier, I can simply attack those. And yes, you can attack two together, but it's pretty difficult to line that up unless you are in a situation like this. And so it's always best to attack two together if possible. And again, if you fall into danger, simply use that diagonal. And I'm trying to get my magic back up just in case we do get further in this game. And this isn't the last level, this is the penultimate full level of the game before we go on to the end of level boss. The enemies aren't amazingly intelligent, but they get slightly more intelligent as you play the game, and I'd say the learning curve in Golden Axe is absolutely perfect. It starts off very easy, because this is only a 20-minute game, it lures the player in, and on booting this they know that they're going to get far. It's just that in the one-player mode you really have to be careful, and in the two-player mode, well, you can tackle those guys head on. These stone men really do take some hits to knock down, and sometimes you can be attacked and attacked again. Just when you think they're dead, they keep coming back. So you have to wait for that voice sound effect to tell you that they're dead, and I don't think that you can lob those off the edge of that cliff, but it's a great effect to do that anyway. If you tap twice in the same direction, our character will also run, and running along that screen is certainly great because this game moves slightly slower than the arcade original, and that's a slight shame, but I find everything else is smooth. Even this forced screen scrolling is very smooth, and so that is reminiscent of the arcade, and so this is better than the Sega Mega Drive conversion, and even slightly better than the Atari ST. Looking at these graphics, I even appreciate the textured flooring. They could have made that very bland and boring and flat, but you can see the textures on the walls and on this great floor really do add something, and they make it stand up above the normal platformer, certainly the ones that we got on the Commodore 64. But this was released on the 64, pretty identical, except that there was no two-player mode, and there were less dragons as well. On the Amiga, I'm just about to lose my second life, having lost my last energy, and so we have one more life in the bank. At this point, I'm pressing the keys for the Amazon, and then she can unleash some more fire, which, although it looks pretty harmless, will actually destroy those guys, and that takes us to the end of the level, where we can hopefully pick up some more magic and some more energy as well. In this case, the Amazon has her energy all the way back up to the top, and the dwarf is busy milking all those extra magic spells, and then we can stand some kind of progress on the next level. We have now leaped off the back of an eagle, which has taken us all the way to the final palace in this game, which leads on to the final boss. This is the final scrolling level before the boss fight, and this is as far as we got last time. It's only a short hop from here to the boss, so let's see if we can get any further. Well, the answer in this case is no. I committed suicide again by dropping down and having someone ram me off, and you might notice that the Amazon is still on her original 3 lives and has only just lost her first energy, and that's the second one down, so the learning curve really does spike from here on in, and that's a life over just like that. So this screen is actually the most dangerous screen in the entire game. You really have to lay into those guys and stay in the final quarter of that bridge, otherwise you'll be thrown off it, and as we've seen, losing lives in this section is ridiculously easy. Like Street Fighter 2, the arcade version features some background animations, including the eye of this eagle or hawk, which is supposed to look around and look at the player, but it doesn't move on the Amiga, and the colour scheme is of course limited on the Amiga. There are no 32 colour palette sprites here. This is very much 8 colour territory. This particular woman is also rock hard, and you'll have to demolish her maybe 10 times to make her stop appearing and running towards that player, and she will try to steal her dragon ride back as well. So you can see I'm laboriously moving through those hits, and eventually that woman will die. At this point I would usually use my second player magic against these guys, and then use the dwarf magic against the 2 bosses which appear, and then that takes us on to some more energy and some more magic. But unfortunately the dwarf, i.e. me, is dead, so I cannot do that. All I can do in the meantime is move on to the scores. Amiga Power has the lowest score with 35%, saying that Golden Axe on the Amiga required no skill whatsoever. The second lowest score came from Amiga User International with 73%. Megazone magazine gave it 74%, along with Amiga Action at 74%. CO Amiga gave Golden Axe 78, along with the current Lemon Amiga score on the Lemon Amiga database. Amiga Format gave this 80, Zero gave Golden Axe 83, The One gave this game 90%, and CMVG originally rated it 80%, but then put that score up to 90 for the budget release, and gives Golden Axe an average score of 7.5 out of 10. Music, which isn't too annoying. I like the sound effects and I like the atmosphere in this game. I think the graphics are well drawn. If only the characters move slightly more quickly, then this would be simply arcade perfect. But at the moment, unfortunately, Simon is just about to breathe his last with this warrior Amazon, and That's because the bosses are about to walk on the screen as well. And so this is the penultimate 2 bosses before we get to the final boss. And in the arcade version, that's a seamless switch from level to level, while on the Amiga we had to put up with some disk loading. But the disk load times are very quick on the Amiga, and so that doesn't really spoil anything. And so we were almost at the end, but that's as far as we got during 3 plays of this game. And comparing this to the arcade original, you can see we were almost there. You can see the eagle has a very nice moving eye, and the eagle bridge is very difficult, but after that we move seamlessly on to the boss. And the boss in this game is very easy, and if we have that dragon, then that makes that job even easier. At the end of the game, you'll be provided with a FIN on the map, Fin, which means that the game is complete, and then you'll be treated to the end of game sequence. The original arcade ending, and as you can see, all the characters jump out of the arcade board and run out onto the street, chasing us in the meantime. And so that's a great ending. That was the arcade ending. Let's see if the Amiga crew managed to convert the arcade ending as perfectly as they tried to convert the game itself. And you can see the map is virtually identical, as is the arcade room that we end up in. Thank you for viewing another Lemon Amiga Playguide and review.